What's up, folks? Welcome to the pre-week 3 presser. Little late night edition here. Came back from softball. Got a busy day at work tomorrow. Gonna sneak this in with a quality 5 minutes in length. Got a good matchup against Alex this week. We'll kind of run through that. Run through, how the last two matchups went real quick. There's a lot of trade talks buzzing. Kind of run through who I've got and maybe how I value them, how looking at the outlook for the rest of the year. We'll kick it off. We'll talk about the last 2 weeks. That first week, real tough matchup against Owen. A lot of the squad didn't perform. Kenneth Walker really let me down. Josh Allen did his best. It just wasn't enough. Lost by a point. Hopefully that game doesn't come back to hurt in the seeding by the end of the year. But things happen. Week 2 against Jackson, another close matchup. Came down to Monday night. Essentially had C.J. Stroud and Dicker the kicker against young stud wideout at Tampa, Ibuka. Ibuka scored a tutty, but it wasn't enough. Stroud had 13, 14, 15 points, I think. Dicker had 8 or so. Enough to win by about 4.5. Again, close matchup, but good teams win ugly. That's all I'll kind of say on that. Against Alex this week, he's got a sneaky good team, I think. He's got a weird stat going on with the Giants, which typically I would not endorse, except last week they dropped like 45 points or something stupid. So I guess we'll see how that goes. The last 2 matchups have been close, like I said. I don't know if I can handle another close one this week. Hopefully we get some points early and often, and then I can have a restful Monday. Because as of right now, I don't have anybody playing Monday. So we'll see how that goes. Let's run through the squad. So Josh Allen, obviously QB1, down week last week. Kind of a weird game. Bill scored a ton of points. He didn't do a whole lot except get a nosebleed, which is kind of out of character for him. So hopefully tomorrow he drops a good number of points on Miami, who looks terrible. Hopefully there's not another blowout and he gets some points there. Stroud against Jacksonville. Houston's been kind of disappointing thus far. You'd think with the talent that they have that they'd be able to get the ball moving a little bit better. I think he kind of hurt himself last week. Had some goal line opportunities to get some touchdowns to Nico Collins from the one that he just wasn't able to connect with. So missed out on some points that I think were readily available to him. Hoping he can pick that up. Josh Jacobs, rumor mill going around that he's on the trade block. I don't know. He's been my RB1. I've been his biggest supporter since day one. He's now scored a touchdown in something stupid like 10 straight games going back to last year. I think the Green Bay wideouts really haven't done a ton. They've got some injuries now too, and I expect he's going to be a bigger part in the passing game. So we'll see. Breece Hall, down game this week or last week. Justin Fields got hurt. Jets just looked bad. He had a good week 1. I think he's due for a bounce back, especially against Tampa, who was kind of vulnerable against the run this week. Hopeful that he kind of has a bounce back. The Jets are going to be the Jets. I think they're going to have a bad offense all year, but I think Hall's going to get as many touches as he can handle. And so I think he's going to be a points by volume guy. JSN kind of developing into a back end wide receiver one. Sam Darnold showed that he could put up points for his wideouts last year in Minnesota, and I think he's showing that he can at least put up points for JSN. It'll be curious to see if he can sustain Kupp getting points too. Jordan Addison had a decent year last year as a wide receiver too in Minnesota's offense, so I think that'll be something to look out for moving forward. Got Debo in the starting lineup. Debo, 12, 13 points last week. Kind of the same thing the week before. Has had a touchdown both weeks. Washington's offense really hasn't looked the best, especially considering how it looked last year. Hopeful that they look a little more consistent. It's great that he's scoring touchdowns, but I'd like to see some more yards, more catches with it, even some more, touches as a running back with Eckler getting hurt. We'll see if they use him like he was used in San Fran. Devontae Smith was wide receiver 3, again, disappointing. It's kind of similar to Washington. Philly's offense hasn't looked as good as they did last year. I think some of that was just game script, kind of a low-scoring defensive battle against Kansas City this last week. I think him and A.J. Brown are due for better weeks. I know Philly's always gonna be run first, but they're due for bigger weeks. Tyler Warren as a tight end, I think he's gonna solidify himself as a mid-range tight end 1 this year in the league, at least for fantasy purposes. Daniel Jones is throwing the ball well right now. I'm curious to see if they give him some weird like wildcat looks like he got in college. If they do that on the goal line, that'd be big for his fantasy outlook. Big pickup last week, Travis Etienne in the flex spot. I don't remember if I reviewed the trade or not in last week's video, but gave up a good wideout in Ladd. Got back Etienne and Devontae Smith we already talked about, but Etienne, again, solid week. Looked a little slow in the first half. Came on strong in the second half. He's getting most of the touches in that backfield. As long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to be a quality RB2 this year. We'll see. Eagles defense played pretty well against Chiefs last week. Tough matchup against the Rams this week. I still think, outlook-wise, they're going to be a pretty solid defense moving throughout the year. But, defenses change. If we got to move them, we got to move them. Digger, the kicker, has been pretty consistent. I think he put up 10 week 1, 8 week 2. Chargers have looked good moving the ball. Not really elite at finishing in the red zone, I'd say. And so I'm hopeful he gets, quite a few opportunities. Down week from New England punter. And he gave up a punt return touchdown, which not completely on him, but things we don't like to see. New England actually looked really good moving the ball, and so he didn't get the chance to punt so much. I think that's more a fluke than anything. I don't have the most faith in Drake May and the wide receiver core there. Running backs are suspect as well, though Ramondre's looked well. So we'll keep an eye out on that. On the bench, almost did me in last week. I had Kenneth Walker on the bench. And Seattle in general is going to be really interesting to watch. I've got Charbonnet as well. I think they're going to lean towards Walker. I think Walker is going to get his points. He'll probably be a back-end RB2. He could move up into the starting lineup depending on trades, depending on how things work. And I'd feel more comfortable this week than I would last week. So we'll see. George Pickens, good week last week. Again, shootout with the Giants, but he got his. He scored a touchdown. Probably will start him over Devontae Smith this week. I think as he gets acclimated into the Dallas offense, he'll keep doing better and better. Jordan Addison will be his last week of suspension. He'll come back. Minnesota hasn't looked great thus far, but I'm hopeful that as JJ kind of grows into himself, comes back from injury, we'll be able to kind of get some connections going with Jordan Addison. Dobbins again, had a good week, had most of the touches. He's a solid RB2 right now, but RBs are a little crowded in the lineup. He's definitely on the trade block. I want to get good value for him. Again, we'll see if he pops off this week. I have a sneaky suspicion could be a high-scoring game at the Chargers. And then new pickup for the week, Jake Browning. Dropped our boy Jackson Dart. I think still at some point this year he's going to get some meaningful snaps. I was hopeful it'd be early. I'm worried, though, that after that shootout last week between New York and Dallas that they're going to keep Russ longer than I would have hoped, and so decided to make the move to go away from him. Brought in Browning, who a couple years ago when he replaced Bro looked good, or good enough. If he's fantasy relevant, then we've got a decent QB3 for bye weeks, and if anything happens, low cost move. If he's not anything special, we move on. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, here's to a good week, and then I'll be back in a week to discuss how it went.